Hi, everybody. Venus and star blessings to all of you. Okay, so I have rectified Julian Assange's time. And the most interesting thing for me personally, right, uh, is that I actually intuitively picked the degree of his rising sign. Sometimes I do that. It's not very often, I must admit. But in other words, my intuition is very, 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 very accurate. So started by picking the 29th degree of Scorpio. And after testing that degree with numerous things, it is 100% clear that that actually is his ascendant degree in tropical zodiac. Okay, it's different in Babylonian, sidereal, etc. I'm actually going to be focusing on tropical today because the tropical zodiac is just as important, although there are many that would like to argue that or deny it or whatever. And that's fine. I'm not here to even talk about that kind of debate. I respect all systems, actually. So, and here's the thing, right? There's two primary things I'm going to highlight to you in a moment, and that is that it is only this degree, which means a very specific time of birth, that can point to what I'm going to reveal to you. One is a relocated chart, and the other thing is the Sabian symbol for a very specific degree in that relocated chart. So quite apart from anything else we can look at, which there's, lots of other things we can look at in his chart natally, and or through certain predictive techniques and so forth. That's a whole other thing that we could add to that. But honestly, with what I've found so far, it's very, very clear this is his time of birth. And of course, it would be interesting to explore things further, but yeah, I don't have the time to do that today. So today, what I want to share with you guys is the power of your relocated chart, which I've always known that that is a very powerful chart. And I guess it comes again from my own personal experience, because when I relocated for many years in the Middle East, I was working with or looking at with my relocated chart for the Middle East, and it was incredibly descriptive of how my life and journey unfolded in that part of the world. So I was very, very convinced because of my own experience, and then subsequently looking at multiple other people's journeys and experiences in terms of relocation, that relocation charts are actually powerful and they do work. But I have to say that Julian Assange's example is going to be, it's going to be on my top 5 forever. There's no question about it. So the first thing is this. So this is his rectified time of birth. It comes to 2:48:40. That's 2 p.m. 48 minutes and 40 seconds. As you can see, that's incredibly precise. Now, the other thing to note is that whilst his recorded time on, I think it's astro.com or perhaps other sites as well, is recorded at 3 p.m., it's very rare that somebody is born right on the dot, on the hour. Very, very rare. So if you ever see that time, or if that's the time you've been given, you really need to verify it. Okay. And rectification is not easy. Most astrologers don't do it. It is a bit tedious. It does take a fair bit of time. You got to work on a lot of different things. It takes a lot of brain focus, a lot of mental focus. It's not easy. Most people can't even do it. Anyway, I tend to do it because my teacher, who I first started studying astrology with, that's like, he's a master in rectification. Literally, he is a master in it. He's been doing it for nearly 50 years. So, yeah. And we've both looked at this together, actually, and we've both come up with different things that verify this particular time. So this particular, that's what I was going to say. The documented time was 3 p.m. in terms of what's documented online, But what's also recorded online is that his mother said he was born sometime before 3 p.m. Sometime before 3 p.m. She never said 3 p.m. to begin with. Someone has rounded it off to 3 p.m., which gives him Sagittarius ascendant, and that's completely incorrect. And so to round that up and actually change somebody's ascendant, that's very sloppy work. Well, you're not reading the soul's the soul's blueprint or codes correctly. So this is a time which gives him 29 degrees of Scorpio and 2 minutes. Okay, and it places basically these two planets right on the ascendant. Jupiter's from the 12th house side, Neptune's on the first house side. Now, what's going to happen is this. First of all, in terms of where he was exonerated, let's quickly talk about that, because that's where the relocated chart has been taken to. He was exonerated in this tiny little place off the Pacific Islands somewhere, right? A place called Garapan, Garapan. It's only got 40,000 people. Tiny, 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 tiny little place in this tiny, tiny, tiny little courtroom. And so when you relocate his chart to that particular place, what happens is, and this is why honestly, so much of our life is so fated. We like to think that, we can change everything. We are in complete control. And that is just, unfortunately, not actually true. Unfortunate, fortunate, whichever way you want to look at it. So we're just the iceberg, we're just literally the tip of the iceberg, and everything else underneath the unconscious is what actually maps everything out relative to what we might call fate or destiny, for that matter, which are two different things, but that's another subject. So when you relocate his chart, because of it's bizarre actually, because even though he was very close, it's considered as part of the US, this particular location, right? But it's not in the US, but it's considered as connected to the US, which is why the legal matters were able to happen there. However, Julian Assange was born in a place called Townsville in Australia. That's up in far north Queensland. So the latitude and longitude for this location is 19 south and 146 east. Okay, the latitude is 19 and the longitude is 146. And when you see the relocated chart that I'm going to show you in a moment, the latitude and longitude is actually virtually identical, even though he's so many thousands and thousands and thousands of kilometers away from Townsville. On the other side of the planet, it just so happens that those Pacific Islands, that particular region, that tiny little place called Garapan, happens to be on the same lines of latitude and longitude as his birthplace. Virtually the same, not exactly the same, but almost the same. And so that if you understand astrology and you understand latitude, longitude, and how things change based on location, etc., what you should already be thinking in your mind is this, that is that his chart really doesn't change very much at all, because the latitude and longitude are the same. We're using the same day of birth, date of birth, year of birth. We're using the same birth data. We're just simply using the coordinates, latitude, longitude, for the particular location where he was exonerated, where he was made free. This is a very important point to understand. And ironically, it just happens to be that not very much changes, but very specific things do change. And this is where time of birth is so fundamentally crucial when you really want to try and predict. Because prediction is very, very hard. I know there's a lot of people online that claim to predict this, claim to predict that, etc., etc., etc. But honestly, if people were more authentic and more honest and less fearful of not attracting clients or people or viewers, they'd be more honest and they'd say, look, this is not 100%, but these are some of the possibilities. You know, that's being more honest, actually. So prediction is not an easy thing. But when you have an accurate time of birth, the ability to predict becomes something that you can definitely explore with a lot more and come closer to perhaps predicting certain things. And in addition to that, the right time of birth gives you the right ascendant, it gives you the right degrees on the ascendant, it gives you the right degrees on the outside wheel, right, which is the ecliptic, the sun's pathway. You know, if you've got 29 degrees of Scorpio, which he does, that gives him, and I'm using the Kosh house system. So others might come in here and say, well, you know, you can use a different house system. Sure, you can. And if you want to, absolutely go for it. But this is what I'm working with. This is what I have found, and it is verified, okay, through a lot of different things, which I'm going to explain. So, you know, the angles can change quite dramatically with just sometimes with just in a few minutes' time, right? It depends on whether you're born Northern Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere. Certain rising signs rise much quicker in the north, other signs rise much slower here, and vice versa, right? So in terms of fast and slow, rising signs have a different speed in the Northern Hemisphere than they do in the Southern Hemisphere, okay, in terms of fast or slow. That's another fact. So your time of birth, you might have very late degrees of something rising, and you might think, yep, that's my time of birth. But what if your time of birth changed and you had a totally different rising sign, such as what's happened to Julian Assange? Because if you go online, you'll find a chart that gives him early Sagittarius rising. And I always knew he had Scorpio rising. I mean, honestly, with the amount of years that I've been doing astrology and the depth of my own understanding of the archetypes and my own intuition, my own ability to like observe and perceive things, I know when someone's got Scorpio rising. I mean, people who are really good at understanding the archetypes can quite often pick a person's rising sign because it's literally there in their face, you know. And if you look at Julian Assange, you know, he's, you know, it's all Scorpio. There's no two ways about it. That's not, of course, the reason could never be a reason to be convinced that this is the correct time of birth. That's just your own intuition, which may or may not be correct. In most cases, perhaps it is, but that's not enough to validate a time of birth. This is actually called a Nadi time. A Nadi is a complicated system, which is an old ancient Indian system, okay? And that's used for rectification. It's very specific. It's all maths orientated, very complex. I have spoken about it in a video quite a few years ago, actually. So if you looked at my channel and just looked at, typed in Anastasia Cosmic Astrologer time rectification, you'll find that video if you want to understand more about that program, because that's essentially what we use to rectify people's times of birth. Anyway, having said all of that, here's what happens. So let's just go back to Solar Fire. Okay, so I just showed you his rectified chart. Now we're going to go to the relocated chart for where he was exonerated. Okay, and what you'll notice is that not a lot has changed. A few things have changed. Okay, first of all, the ascendant goes way back to 16, but that's actually not even the primary key theme here. Some things have changed around. Jupiter's jumped further into the first, so is Neptune. Saturn's moved way high in the middle of the seventh, and you know, a few things have changed. Now, you can see that the midheaven is 1559. Like it's right on the edge, right? It's just like a minute away from turning to 16 degrees, but it's not 16. It's still 1559. This is, you know, when I see things like this is what shows you just how critical time, correct time is, and how fated things are as well. Because first of all, think about it like this. Why was that place chosen as the place where he was going to go and have his hearing in some tiny little, minute little place near the Pacific Islands somewhere, or part of the Pacific Islands where there's only 40,000 people? Why was it that location that was chosen? Now, you might get some people who jump on and give their logical, rational, maybe even legal answer to that question. But I'm more interested in the astrological, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the soul, so the universe, because the stars do not lie. So the point is that what I'm about to read to you, which is the Sabian symbol for the midheaven, basically tells us that this degree of the midheaven can only be this degree with this time of birth. If we had it at 3 p.m., this time of birth, the 3 p.m. would not give 1559 degrees of Leo on the midheaven. It would give a different degree. And the Sabian symbol I'm about to read you, we wouldn't have found it. We'd never know about it. We wouldn't be reading it. Again, this should show you just how important precision of time of birth actually is. Because, as I said, this tiny, minute little place that I had never even heard of, and I'd say most people have never even heard of, gets chosen as the place where he becomes exonerated, where he is freed. Now, one might say, oh, look at the South Node. It's conjunct the midheaven. Yeah, it is. But that South Node at 15 degrees of Leo was there for about 24 hours, if not more. So that's not it. See, the planets, the fastest moving points in the chart are the angles, the vertex, and then the moon. They are the fastest moving points in the chart. Everything else could be there for a day or days or weeks or months, depending on the planet in question. This and time of birth, accurate time of birth, is what actually defines what degrees are going to sit outside this circle. It's not the day you were born. The day you were born, well, the day Julian was born, the sun was at 10 of Cancer. Well, the sun was there at 10 of Cancer for 24 hours. So the sun in Cancer at the 10th degree, that's there for millions of people. That's why a birth chart is so important. And that's why correct time of birth is so important, because each degree corresponds to something very, very specific. Now, in this case, we're looking at the midheaven. And so, just sit down for this, because this will just blow your mind. And if it doesn't, then I really don't know what to say. So when you use the Sabian symbols book, which I use the one from Dane Roger called An Astrological Mandala, the cycle of transformations and its 360 symbolic phases. Once again, I've done a video on how to work with this book and what this book is about. So I'm not going to teach all of that at the moment for viewers that are not familiar with what I'm talking about, right? Because I don't have the time. Plus, I've got a video there if you want to know more about it. But very simply put, when you're looking at a particular degree in the chart, any degree, okay? So in this case, we want to look at the midheaven. So in this book, we are going to go to the Leo section. We're not going to look at the 15th degree. We are going to look at the 16th degree. This is how the book works. When you choose a degree in the chart, in this case, it's 1559, like that is just freaking unbelievable. Right at the edge before it changes. If his time of birth, if we didn't find his right time of birth, as I said before, we wouldn't have this midheaven degree and minute. We just wouldn't have it. We have it because his time has been nailed. Okay, here's the Sabian symbol. And also, this relocated chart, this degree on the midheaven can only occur in that part of the world, in some tiny little place called, what's it called again? Garapan. Some tiny little, minute little place called Garapan. Could only hit everything you see in this chart on the outer wheel, the degrees and minutes, can only occur in that exact same spot, which is where he was exonerated. Okay, so anyway, here is the Sabian symbol. So we go to the 16th degree of Leo. The phrase is called "The storm ended all nature rejoices in brilliant sunshine. I could actually just stop right there, couldn't I? Really. We have to be able to read these symbols for what they represent, which is symbolic language. And given what I just read, which I'll read it one more time, the storm ended. All nature rejoices in brilliant sunshine. That is exactly what happened to Julian. The storm ended. He is rejoicing in brilliant sunshine here back in Australia with his wife and children swimming in the ocean now, finally. The phrase actually even literally describes it. It's not even so cryptic or symbolic. This one's quite literal. And there's more to it. So I'll just read you the rest. The keynote is the surge of life and love after a major crisis. Bingo again. Once again, I wouldn't even need to read any further, but I will. So there's two statements already right at the beginning of the 16th degree of Leo in the Sabian book that perfectly describes that moment in time in Julian Assange's life, which could only occur with this relocated chart in that part of the world with this specific time of birth. Hopefully you will get just how important this is and how it really, it should really validate in your own mind that this time is correct. The symbol speaks clearly for itself. How brilliant the light after long night of the soul. Honestly, this is going to go down in history, this Sabian symbol, for this chart, for this man, for this soul, for this time of birth. Because you couldn't have written a better Sabian symbol, right? For the 16th degree of Leo, describing that moment in time for that soul. It's just fucking brilliant, basically. Okay. Then it says, the battered but unconquered consciousness finds itself exalted in the marriage of sunbeams and rising sap. This indeed is release, in inverted commas, light and life singing in the cleansed and refreshed mind, flooded for a while by the waters of feeling. That's the whole Sabian symbol, everything I just read to you. I mean, if that doesn't nail it in your mind, I really don't know what will. So there's evidence and power in several things. First of all, getting the right time of birth, which is a tricky thing. It's not easy, but it is something that myself and my teacher do. So if you want to have your chart rectified, and believe it or not, it's birth certificate times or written recorded times that we generally rectify. Mother's memories are often extremely difficult to rectify. And that's because often, believe it or not, the memories are not accurate. I've had people where they've told me their mother said they were born 3 in the afternoon and it turned out they were born 3 in the morning. So, you know, when you're I want to say a true astrologer, you really do understand this importance of timing. And if you can't rectify charts because it's too hard, it's too complicated, you don't have the time, this, that, the other, sure, I completely understand that. Most of the time, I don't have time to do that. So a lot of the time I give it over to my teacher to do for me. It's you know, there's a lot of maths involved, a lot of calculations, not my favorite part of astrology at all. But what I appreciate and respect about it is, first of all, how important it is, how it validates so much, and how it shows us really the destiny of the person. And this is another one for the tropical zodiac, for those that might think tropical zodiac is BS, because there are a few of those out there. And it's a really left brain attitude, actually, when you've got that attitude, because it comes down to that you've got to pick one side. And so when you pick one side, you've got to make the other side wrong. That's just left brain Gemini classic stuff. And I'm not a Gemini astrologer. I'm a Sagittarius astrologer. I've got Jupiter in Sag. So I'm able to respect and value and understand there's a deeper and bigger picture. And there's also huge level of mystery of things that we will never know and never understand. And I have enough integrity and honesty to admit that because it's the truth, you know. So all of this was to demonstrate the power of time of birth, accurate time of birth, the power of relocated charts, the power of Sabian symbols. And there it is, folks. So, you know, this out and oh shit. Thank you. Thanks, angels. Just one more thing that I mentioned this on Facebook, and I will just mention it here as well. Okay. So this time of birth, once again, it's only this time of birth that can give us this result. Let me just find something. Where is it? I haven't even had lunch today. Just had a cup of coffee and thought, oh, I've got to get on here and just quickly do this. Okay. So there's something in astrology called Arabic parts, right? Some of you may have heard of those parts, some of you may have not. But, you know, the part of fortune, that's an Arabic part, okay? Most of you have heard of the part of fortune at least, and there it is there. Now, these Arabic parts, they are based on a very specific mathematical formula, which basically includes the ascendant. If you're going to have a mathematical formula with 3 points in the chart, which is usually what it is with Arabic parts, it's 3 points. It'll be the ascendant plus the sun minus Venus, for example, right? Each Arabic part has a different formula in terms of what it adds and what it subtracts, but it always uses the ascendant. In order to get that Arabic part that you are looking for or looking at to be at the correct degree, you've got to start with the right degrees on the ascendant, don't you? Because it's adding the ascendant with 2 other parts, plus or minus. You can't add the ascendant plus or minus 2 other points when it's 10 or 15 or even 5 or even 2 degrees out. You're going to get a different result of the Arabic part in its sign, possibly, and certainly in its degree. So this time of birth, you know what it does? And if this doesn't blow your head off your shoulders, then again, I don't know what will. So this time of birth, turns out that there is a part, an Arabic part called part of imprisonment. You heard correctly, part of imprisonment. That Arabic part of imprisonment, with only this time of birth, basically places the Arabic part in conjunction to Julian's sun. Yeah, shit, like that's just mind-blowing, seriously. It really is. So I'll leave it there and hopefully you appreciate that because it is pretty spectacular to have worked this out. 2 minds did it, myself and my mentor. He put his bid in, I put my bid in. I actually chose the ascendant degree before we verified it with anything, just through my intuition. And I'm proud of that because that's not an easy thing to do. And I didn't even try and do it. When you try to do that, that's when you can't. It's when something just naturally, organically, naturally, authentically comes to you and you have that ability to identify it and recognize it and listen to it. That's the key. That's how you sharpen your intuition, by knowing what's intuitive and what's just a passing thought. And I knew that was my intuition telling me, boom, that's the ascendant degree. So yeah, pretty spectacular stuff. So just in case you're wondering, this is the tab for Arabic parts, and see over here, part of imprisonment. 8 degrees, 57 minutes, which is what, 9 degrees, which is, just over a degree off being exactly conjunct his sun. Very tight orb, which is what we want. And it's there. So, fascinating, hey? I'm going to leave it here, sign off, and see you guys soon with more. Just had to come on and share that. Reach out if you want to explore anything relative to readings. Lots of different types of readings we can look at. There's so many, amazing things we can look at with Venus, especially with what's happening with her transition at the moment. You can just have a whole reading just on Venus from the point of view of the 5 Venus star points, or we can do the Babylonian side to Venus, heliacal phases, whether she was visible, invisible in birth, what that means, etc. We can look at the current Venus star point, which she just changed from Leo morning star to Gemini evening star. What does that mean? We can look at her current transit in relation to this new, because the cycle really begins when she becomes visible. She will not become visible until around the 3rd or 4th of July, which is just a few days away. So it's going to turn the energies right around. I really can't wait. It's just going to be spectacular. So reach out if you're interested in any of that or anything else. And also, I've got 2 courses available with pretty in-depth, eclectic approach to my classes. And I say eclectic because I use the Hellenistic teachings, I use the evolutionary teachings, and I also apply Babylonian teachings up to the point where I understand Babylonian astrology thus far, because that's a field that is much more new to me than all the other areas of astrology that I use and work with. It's only, a couple of years where I've really been delving and integrating those teachings, whereas everything else has been in my brain, so to speak, for most of it, for 26, 27 years. So let me know if you would like to do some work with me. It'd be wonderful to connect and share, and I'll see you guys very soon. Much love and bye for now.